Your first guest speaker, but next up, we're really excited to welcome your next special guest of the morning. And so I'm really pleased to welcome up to our stage someone who knows about the challenges and the opportunities of tackling malnutrition and hunger from his time as Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for David Cameron.
Thank you very much. Honoured to be here. Thank you, Schwartzy, for that introduction. I don't know what Schwartzy had for breakfast, but I want that tomorrow and every day from now on. Honour to follow David Miliband, who's doing such great work on this and other subjects in this area. And welcome to another intervention by an ex-Prime Minister. We used to be very rare. It's just sort of, a couple of us around. Now we're everywhere. I do keep my interventions to a minimum on the basis that being Prime Minister is a difficult enough job without all your predecessors telling you how you should do it. But I'm intervening today because this really matters. That is the simple reason for standing here and joining you and welcoming the creation of this organisation. You'll get a lot of figures today, but there's one just basic, simple figure, which is the number of people facing crisis levels of food insecurity has almost doubled from 146 million in 2019 to 278 million today. And this is not inevitable. The reason for these sorts of events is we can do something about it. We have in recent years had droughts without a famine. We've also had famines without a drought. And I think that tells us something. This is not some inevitable climactic thing where there's nothing we can do. We can intervene, and governments can make a huge difference. My credentials for being here are that I led a government that was very proud to reach 0.7% of gross national income in aid payments. It was long an aim of both main parties, all three main parties in British politics, and I was very proud that we did that. I played a role with Ban Ki-moon and others in drawing up the plan for the Sustainable Development Goals, and one of the things I did in that committee when we were haggling over it in the UN was make sure that tackling extreme poverty was number one and dealing with hunger was number two. Those are the foundational elements of the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's why it's so important we're here talking about extreme hunger. And of course, 10 years ago, it was in this very building at Unilever, and thank you Unilever again for being with us and for sticking with us, that I launched a Nutrition for Growth partnership at the time of the Olympics and brought the world together and made this a real focus. And I think we followed through and made a lot of difference. But as I say, this issue is foundational. If you can't eat, you can't grow. If you can't eat, you can't work. If you can't eat, you can't parent. You can't bring up children. You can't build a future. Ultimately, if you can't eat, you can't live. So it's not just loss of potential, this issue, although it is about loss of potential, it's also about loss of life. Another former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, wrote a very good book about courage, and he said the important point about courage is it is the virtue without which the other virtues cannot exist and thrive. And in many ways, this issue is the foundational issue in the same way. Without action to tackle hunger, the other things we want to achieve, whether it is better education, whether it's better childcare, whether it's better healthcare, these things we cannot make progress on. So it is completely foundational. And the circumstances we face today in which this organisation is being launched are particularly difficult. There's something of a triple whammy that has hit many African countries of higher fuel prices, higher food prices, and of course, falling aid budgets as well. And not only falling aid budgets, but aid budgets that are being used up in many cases because of the refugee crises that we have, not least the Ukrainian refugee crisis, which I'm all in favour of using our aid budget. We shouldn't want to change the rules just because the circumstances don't suit us. It's important that we give those people a home and a life and a chance. I was delighted to host a Ukrainian family. I'm happy to say they've moved out of Chipping Norton. They've decided Chipping Camden is even better than Chipping Norton, so they've left me, but they're thriving. It's important we do that, but those are the circumstances, that whammy of things hitting African countries, and I think it is a moment for government to think about how it uses its aid budget, particularly to focus on this issue. And of course, this comes on top of the pandemic, and it comes on top of the long-term challenges posed by climate change. However, I stand here this morning optimistic about this for two very simple reasons. One, we know it can be done, and two, crucially, I think we know some of the ways how it can be done. We know it can be done because the 25 years from 1990 saw the fastest reduction in poverty in global history. And at the same time as that reduction in poverty, the numbers facing extreme hunger fell by more than half. So this can be done. How can it be done? Well, number one, sustained commitment from donor governments and aid agencies. Now, I know aid budgets are stretched. I'm not going to get into that argument this morning, but there is something else we can do, which is the multilateral development banks all have got extra lending capacity. All could do more. All have balance sheets that could be stretched further. All of our governments are effectively shareholders in these multilateral development banks. And I would urge them in the G7, in the G20, in the OECD, in whatever other meetings they're meeting in, ask the question, can you do more without losing your AAA credit status to lend more money, to help more countries to do more? Now, I know that in the great pantheon of aid campaigns, drop the debt, make poverty history, expand the balance sheets of the multilateral development banks is not really the catchiest slogan that we've all come up with. But nonetheless, there's $1 trillion out there if we do this properly, and it can make a very big difference. Number two, it's not just governments and aid agencies that need to act. It is the private sector. It is our researchers, our scientists, our charities, our NGOs, and that's why it's so important we're here in Unilever today. Third point, use our expertise. We do have expertise. Britain has been good at this. We were an aid superpower. In my view, we can be an aid and development superpower once again. Very good step that Andrew Mitchell, who was my DFID Secretary of State, probably should have kept him as DFID Secretary of State, but that's a different question, is back in the cabinet as a dedicated aid minister with a cabinet post. And I think that's hugely important, and Britain can build on that. Fourth and final thing, and final point I want to make, is the other ingredient that is necessary is permanent pressure, permanent reminders, permanent campaigning to draw the world's attention, the government's attention, the British people's attention to what is happening. And that's why it's great that my old coalition partner, Johnny Oates, is working so hard and setting up this organisation. We need you. It is not inevitable what is happening. It can be stopped. It's pressure and campaigns and raising the profile and sharing the expertise. These things are vital. And as you do so, I'll support you every step of the way. Thank you.